What does that
Yeah.
tell you about what to expect with Christianity? That adds
Yeah.
kind of textual meat to the bones of the
Mhm.
statement that Jesus made at the upper room discourse. He's about to leave. It's next day he's crucified. He tells the disciples, in this world,
Yeah.
you will have tribulation. I read that because it is a reminder to me that the cross I bear, and again, I'm not trying to be maudlin and woe is me or anything like that, but is a mercy
Yeah.
from God
Yeah.
that protects me. Comfort is available, like Paul writes in 2 Corinthians, but it's not like a magic wand. It isn't
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm going through this hardship. Oh, Lord, the comfort, I'm quote the verse, and then we expect, okay,
Yes.
this is the comfort to descend upon us. Now,
Mhm.
I do think, TC, that happens with some people sometime.
Yeah.
And they say, in the midst of this terrible hardship, I just felt enveloped by God, even though I had the pain of the hardship. That doesn't happen to everybody. And
Yeah.
quite frankly, that has not happened to me very much.
Hi, I'm TC, and I want to welcome you to True Comfort, where it's our desire to live out 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 and 4, which assure us that we have a God who comforts us in all our afflictions
Hmm.
and encourage us to share the comfort that we've received with others who need it. And I want to welcome my guest, Greg Koukl. Greg, thank you so much for being here
Well,
today.
we had some conversation before we went on the air, and I'm raring to go. I really enjoy talking with you. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thanks.
I am so excited about it. And before we get started, I'm going to read your bio so listeners can learn a little bit more about you. Greg founded Stand to Reason in
Mhm.
1993 and currently serves as president. He has spoken on more than 90 university campuses, both in the U.S. and abroad, and has hosted his own call-in radio show for over 30 years, advocating for Christianity worth thinking about. He's debated atheists such as Michael Shermer on national radio and Deepak Chopra on national television. And recently, was it a debate or just a conversation
Well,
with
it was kind
Alex
of a
O'Connor?
group conversation on the diary of a CEO, commonly known as DOAC for the acronym. Yeah, that was
With
just actually 2 months ago and about a month ago, 6 weeks ago in New York City, I did this. And then about a month ago, it got released. So it's available now.
and that was a conversation with a pretty well-known atheist of
Yeah,
today,
well,
Alex
Alex
O'Connor.
O'Connor, which I didn't know this before that, but my team told me, hey, this is the most famous atheist in the world right now. And by the way, TZ, he's only 26 years old.
Wow.
He's
Okay.
he's very smart and very clever and very good
Okay.
at what he does. So it was an interesting conversation. But yeah, that just
I'll have to
recently.
find it. I'm curious. I'm sure you handled it so brilliantly, and I hope he learned some things and
Yeah,
God
I
planted
did
some
learn a
seeds.
lot, and those are
Yeah.
one of those things where there's usually not a slam dunk in one
Yeah.
of those circumstances with someone
Mm,
like him.
mm.
There was another guest on too, but nevertheless, that was the main issue with Alex. It was interesting.
Wow. Well, so you've had lots of interesting, wonderful, influential conversations and written several books, 7 books, including, here's some of the titles: Street Smarts, Using Questions to Answer Christianity's Toughest Challenges,
Mhm.
The Story of Reality, How the World Began, How it Ends, and Everything Important That Happens in Between, Tactics, A Game Plan for Discussing Your Christian Convictions, and Relativism, Feet Firmly Planted in Midair.
Yeah.
You have been focused on, featured on Focus on the Family, radio show, interviewed on CBN and BBC, quoted widely. You have your master's degree in philosophy of religion from Talbot and
Mhm.
ethics, and a master's in Christian apologetics with honors. And you are an adjunct. Are you still an adjunct professor at Talbot?
I think so.
Okay.
Until they tell me differently.
Okay.
It's been maybe a year or so or two since I've done anything with them, but it's a feather in my cap to be associated with them. Maybe they think the same for me. So I
I'm
guess I'm
sure they
still on the
do.
docket. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, I have to just say on a personal note that the book, The Story of Reality,
Mm,
I recommend it all the time.
mm,
It's one of the very first books that when someone says, "What's a great book to read?" when they're even starting in their study of apologetics, I'm like, "You have to read this one. Send this to
mm,
your teenagers." It is such a easily accessible, beautiful description
mm.
of God's big story. And I love the
Yeah,
title, everything important that happens in between. I love it. But I know we'll talk more about that probably
sure.
later on in our conversation, but I want to just start by recommending that to everyone who listens. And the book Tactics. I think that is indispensable, and especially in our day, because we have
Mhm,
such a hard time communicating with one another in
mhm.
a divisive culture. And so with whether it's with your kids, um, your adult children that might be struggling, or friends, neighbors, family at Thanksgiving table.
Yes,
It's a perfect book to get right before the holidays if you have a
right.
divided family. Anyway, I will put that in the show notes as well, but I want
Yeah,
to
thank
thank
you.
you.
It's
Yeah,
I found that it's a great the method that I offer there is so simple,
it
and it
is.
has been so life-changing for me and so many that like yourself that have recommended the book that it's not it it's a conversational technique that is not characteristically what people would think is confrontational. So it's
Right.
easy, and
Hmm.
you're not going to ruin your Thanksgiving dinner
Right.
event with your atheist Uncle Charlie
Yeah.
if you start employing some of the things in the book. So just saying.
I agree. And I also think it really takes a lot of stress out.
Yeah.
Anxiety. I think a lot of us have, even the thought of having a confrontational conversation just makes us feel anxious. And your strategies really help diffuse that,
Hmm.
and take the weight off, even the whole idea of just having a pebble in someone's shoe rather than
That's right.
feeling like you need to move them completely over to your position. Very,
Yeah.
very helpful book
Yeah.
that I highly recommend.
Yeah. No need to swing for the fences in these conversations. That's my view. You just
Yeah.
a little bit here, a little bit there,
Yeah.
stone in the shoe, as you mentioned. That's
Yeah.
kind of my approach.
So relational and so
Hmm.
other-centered too, just the whole art of asking good questions, which shows that we actually care.
Yeah.
So just to remind listeners what we do here on the True Comfort podcast is I invite people who have intentionally studied the evidence for the biblical worldview to come on and open
Hmm.
up their hearts to share with us a place of heartbreak or maybe an ongoing struggle, and how God's word or the biblical meta narrative
Hmm.
comforts them. And then not only that, to share with us why they believe it, what
Hmm.
might be a line or two of evidence that causes them to know God's promises are not empty. And I
Hmm.
do this so that we will all see that we are not alone in experiencing painful things as Christians.
Hmm.
And we will see that we are not fools for opening up our Bibles to find hope. Then when we listen, we will be encouraged not only um, to feel secure in our faith, but to add tools to our own tool belt so that when we struggle in the future, we can encourage our own
Hmm.
selves, but also be better equipped to
Sure.
help others in our lives. And so that is why I have invited Greg today. And I have to say, listeners, I can always see, it's an interesting thing when you're a podcaster because you can see how long people listen to your show, like what the duration is. You can see how many people tuned in for a minute and then how long they stayed. And I want to just encourage you, if you are listening today, to please listen to the very end, because I I know that Greg is going to bless you. I know he's going to bless me. He is just a wealth of wisdom, which is not just knowledge, but the application of it in a real life situation. And so please stay and listen to Greg. I also want to just say that these conversations are not pre-scripted. And so the topic matter does sometimes touch upon things that are very hard to hear and can be potentially triggering. So I just always want to put that out for listeners just to know we are trying to keep it real here and want to bring comfort to real places. And with that, I am going to quit talking for a while and just go ahead and open up the floor for you, Greg, to start
Okay.
wherever you would like to.
Yeah, that's great. It just occurred to me, kind of laying a foundation of expectation for the Christian might be good,
Yeah.
because I became a Christian during the Jesus movement. If you saw the Jesus Revolution, you get a little
Mhm.
taste of what that was like. It's pretty accurate, I think, about the Jesus freak hippie thing going on. That was me, 52 years ago. First church I crossed the threshold of 2 weeks after I became a Christian was Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa,
Mm.
which was kind of the epicenter of that entire movement. But there was kind of what we would call now a meme, a kind of a way of speaking and talking about Christianity that troubled me at the time, especially as I grew in Christ a little bit more. And the idea was become a Christian and Jesus will transform your life, which is true. But um, lots of times he transforms our lives in ways that's very difficult and painful for us because, he turns us upside down. We thought we were right side up,
Mm.
and then he goes in and he starts doing radical surgery. And so the meme was, and he'll solve all your problems kind of thing, get
Yeah.
your kids off drug. He'll fix your marriage. He'll do this, he'll do that and everything. And it was an inappropriately triumphal. And what happened is a lot of people who were won to Christ in that way found out differently in their life, and then there was an attrition rate. So I heard a guy
Mhm.
say once, "Whatever you're one with, you are one to.
Yeah.
Whatever you're
That's
one
good.
with, you
Yeah.
are one to." So if you're one with a strong emotional experience with Christ, and some people are, the danger is you're one to that, and you
Mhm.
expect that thing to continue. So,
Yeah.
so here's the foundational observation I made. Um, the book of Hebrews was written to suffering Christians.
Mm.
The book of First Thessalonians was written to suffering Christians. The book of Second Thessalonians was written to suffering Christians. The book of First Peter was written to suffering Christians. Paul wrote Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Second Timothy for sure
Mhm.
from prison.
Yeah.
Now, what does that
Yeah.
tell you about what to expect with Christianity? That adds
Yeah.
kind of textual meat to the bones of the
Mhm.
statement that Jesus made at the upper room discourse. He's about to leave. It's next day he's crucified. He tells the disciples, "In this world,
Yeah.
you will have tribulation." Then he
Mhm.
says, "Be of good cheer. I will overcome the world." But overcoming, you learn what that looks like by walking with Christ for a long time.
Yeah.
And when I address non-Christian audiences, I usually start by telling them that 52 years ago, now, when I was a student at UCLA, I began thinking more carefully about the claims that Jesus made about himself and about the world, and the claim he made on my own life. And I pushed back a lot and argued a lot and finally came to the conclusion Jesus got it right, and the smart money was on Jesus. So I just tell them I began to follow Jesus. And it's not been easy. This is what I tell
Mhm.
them, the non
Mhm.
Christian audience, right out of the gate. It's not been easy, but
Yeah.
it's been reality. And that's what I wanted. I want reality. I don't
Mhm.
want, it was Karl Marx, who said, founder of communism. I got to add that because a lot of people don't know who he is anymore. That religion is the opiate of the people.
Yeah.
It's this drug you take to make you feel better because there's no foundation to it. He's an atheist, right? So you just take what meal, excuse me. And pardon me, a lot of people, even Christians, kind of think of it that way that, well,
Mm.
this is just my thing and makes me feel better, whatever. And our case as followers of Christ is not that it's just our placebo or sugar pill that makes us feel better, a
Mhm.
psychological trick. But it's reality. And if it's not reality, I don't want it.
Right.
You
Amen.
know,
Yeah.
I look, and I can find better placebos in a sense.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
I wouldn't choose Christianity if I was just trying to find something fun. I'd choose Eastern religion, which is high in personal liberty and low in personal responsibility,
Yeah.
all
You're
God in
right.
some sense and whatever.
Mhm.
But nevertheless, I became convinced that Christianity was true. So with regards to the comfort issue, so that's just to set expectations.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how this works. Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. If you ever read Pilgrim's Progress by Bunyan, this is one of the most largest sales in the history of the world. Like the Bible's first, and I think Bunyan's second. Well,
Wow.
now since Harry Potter, that may beat Bunyan, but nevertheless. But you read that book, And it's a Christian classic, obviously, and everybody should read it sometime in their Christian life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all about the hard trial and struggle of making it from conversion to heaven.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's Pilgrim's Progress, the
Mm-hmm.
Pilgrim's Progress. So just to be on alert here that this is the nature of the Christian life. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be down in the basement digging holes, oh, what woe is me.
Right. Right.
That's not my view, but I have a realistic understanding of what Christianity entails, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I have something that someone gave me, a brother in Christ gave me when I was going through difficult circumstances and reflecting those details to him. And these were difficult circumstances that were um, long lasting in my life. And many of us face these things
Mm-hmm.
that don't go away.
Yeah.
And generally, they're either health issues or they're relational issues,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't go away. And then we think, why not? I've been praying a long time. So my friend gave me this citation from Charles Spurgeon, the last of the great Puritans and one of the greatest preachers of all time. And here's what he said. And by the way, I read this every single week. I read it this morning, in fact, when I was having my time with the Lord.
Okay.
And I read it slowly so it doesn't become rote for me. And here's what he said. He said, my witness is that those who are honored of their Lord have usually to endure, in public. So this, especially individuals have public visibility because of their contribution to the kingdom. People look up to them, and they should. But what they don't realize is what their interior or personal lives often amount to.
Mm-hmm.
So my witness is that those who are honored of their Lord in public have usually to endure a secret chastening or to carry a peculiar cross. In other words, nobody else sees this, except for maybe some people really close to them. And here's the reason that he gives: lest by any means they exalt themselves and fall into the snare of the devil.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I read this is, and here's how this encourages me in those private crosses that I carry, and, not to be presumptive, but maybe you carry, and virtually everybody confronts it sometime in their life. And I will say the more effective a person is in the kingdom, the bigger these secret chastenings or peculiar crosses happen to be. I read that because it is a reminder to me that the cross I bear, and again, I'm not trying to be maudlin and woe is me or anything like that, but is a mercy
Yeah.
from God
Yeah.
that protects me.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, as I've read that and in an attitude of prayer, I said, okay, God, I get it. And thank you. Thank you. Every time I read it, I thank God for the mercy of the hardship in my life, because I believe what Spurgeon has said. In fact, I can see in my own life how that particular element there of the purpose of the cross or the chastening has borne really good fruit in my life. I guess I could say, quite frankly, without being too self-reflective here, but that I don't think I could carry the responsibilities that the Lord has entrusted with me now if that hadn't been the case in my life. Which this brings me to another point about the whole comfort thing, because we were talking a little bit before the show started about how the comfort is available, like Paul writes in 2 Corinthians, but it's not like a magic wand. It isn't like, okay, I'm going through this hardship. Oh, Lord, the comfort, I'm quote the verse, and then we expect, okay,
Yes.
this is the comfort to descend upon us. Now, I do think, TC, that happens with some people sometime.
Yeah.
And they say, in the midst of this terrible hardship, I just felt enveloped by God, even though I had the pain of the hardship. That doesn't happen to everybody. And
Yeah.
quite frankly, that has not happened to me very much. And it's comfort comes in different forms.
Yeah.
And it's not just an existential or subjective sense of, I don't know how to explain it, what people might think of comfort, a calming and
Right.
a cessation of the pain or something like that. It's like when you're in the cold and you come out of the cold and you come into your warm house and you're comforted because you're not
Right.
cold anymore. You're not always brought out the cold in the way God helps us and comforts us.
That's
Does that make
so
sense to
good.
you?
Yes, it does, and I just wanna say that is so important. I can't wait to hear what you're getting ready to say. I don't wanna interrupt, but I'm just like, that is a really important point for all
Yeah.
of us, and it is actually a comforting point
Hmm.
to
Yes.
know that if I mean, it brings me comfort to know that if I'm not feeling comfort immediately,
Hmm.
nothing's wrong with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, continue.
So sometimes I say, I don't know if this makes you feel better, but it might make you, no, how did I put it? But it might make you feel better about feeling bad. Like that.
That's a
It
good way to
doesn't
put
take
it.
the bad feeling away, but then you
Yeah.
see it in its context.
Mhm.
Now, I can think of a couple of occasions. Very early in my Christian life. So this was, I guess, that could be 19. I became a Christian in 73. So this was about my ninth or 10th year as a Christian. And there had been plenty of chastisement going on, but I was facing a particularly difficult challenge, an emotional challenge in my life, and it was relational. And it just was so eviscerating for me over a period of time, a few years.
Hmm.
But when I came out of that, as time went on, I was able to really be aware of the particular thing that God was using with that circumstance to make changes in me that absolutely had to be made. Now,
Hmm.
remember, and I'm taking comfort, this ex post facto, like years down the line, I'm looking back and I said, oh, now that makes sense.
Mm.
All right. So remember, I could have an attitude of trust for other reasons we'll get to, that God is here and he's not going away and he's helping me and he's working with me and he's disciplining me. But it's another thing altogether when sometime down the line after that episode of discipline is over with, and then you go, now I see. You don't always see that.
Right.
You don't always see that. But sometimes you can look back over your shoulder. And I
Mhm.
know most of your listeners who've been around for a while with the Lord probably have occasions like that.
Mhm.
And that's when they go, now I get it. That was worth it. There's a verse in Hebrews 12 that where Paul is not Paul, the author of Hebrews. I
Right.
don't think it's Paul.
Can't wait to find out who it is when we get to
Yeah.
heaven.
By the way, just as an aside, in the second or third chapter, the author is saying that it was that this information about the gospel was proved to him by other people who are eyewitnesses or whatever. Well, that's not Paul, because Paul had his personal thing with Jesus. In any event, this is aside. So it's
Right.
not Paul, but the writer of Hebrews um, says there that every good father disciplines his children, right?
Mhm.
But God disciplines us better than our earthly fathers, right? And then he says this: all discipline, for the moment, seems not to be joyful,
Right.
but sorrowful.
Mhm.
It's a pain.
Yeah.
But then he adds, afterwards, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness.
Yeah.
So the author is now telling us, and this actually companions so well with your first, Second Corinthians passage, because it tells you a little bit about how that comfort needs to be understood. That there is comfort in knowing that God is in this, even though it's painful, to bring you somewhere else that's really good, in which you will experience the virtues that He's created, and the experience of the virtues will be satisfying.
Mm.
So the virtue becomes satisfying in itself.
Right.
That's called sanctification.
Yeah.
Okay. So all of that fits together in a nice way. And now in, currently, there's been another challenge in my life that has been very long,
Mm.
not in like numbers of years. And where the other one's just like 2 or 3 years. Now this one's much, much longer. But
Mm.
during this challenge, I am encouraged and strengthened to trust by the reflection on what I know took place years ago. Now, there
Yeah.
are times like this morning when I'm reflecting on the Spurgeon quote. I'm pointing it to here. I can see it on
Yeah.
my screen.
Mm.
Where I said, okay, I've been carrying this cross for a long time, Lord. And, thank you. And you've done a lot of good things. Are we done yet?
Yeah.
Can we
Mhm.
just move on to something else and have resolution here? That hasn't come yet.
Mm.
And we'll see, but God knows best. And so this helps me. So now this is from inside of Christianity. All right. Now, why would I have confidence that inside Christianity, I have answers that I can trust on, and that it's not just a psychological trick, the Marx's opiate
Right.
of the people kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the role of apologetics functions so effectively in my life, because I have this conviction. So at Stand to Reason, we train Christians to think more carefully about their convictions, and this is part of our mission statement, and then be able to defend it with others.
Mm-hmm.
But I have come to realize over all these years of doing this that the most difficult critic that we will ever face is ourselves,
Yeah. Well.
especially when the hardships come into our lives, and then we ask, hey, where's God?
Mm-hmm.
How could God let this happen to me? Now, this reflects, I think, the question is completely understandable, but it reflects a misunderstanding about the story of reality that we'll get to in a little bit. But just to go on record, the role of apologetics helps the Christian almost more for himself than it does the Christian for the critic.
Yeah.
And in my own life, I can think of really hard times that I've gone through, and just also to go on record, everybody has doubts.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has doubts at
Yeah.
some time or other, greater or less. A lot depends on the circumstances, the challenges they face, and their understanding of reasons for the truth of Christianity. But nevertheless, everybody has doubts. So some people beat themselves up. Oh, I'm doubting. Everybody has doubts.
Yeah.
Look at John the Baptist.
Right.
Are you the one? He's sitting in jail. He didn't expect this, right? Are
Right.
you the one, or should we expect somebody else? Now,
Mm-hmm.
remember, John the Baptist was the guy who God gave a specific sign to at the
Right.
beginning of the Gospels, and that was when the
Right.
Holy Spirit came down at Jesus' baptism. And he didn't. He maybe had some suspicions about Jesus because they were cousins.
Yeah.
So he's growing up kind of with a
Right.
perfect guy. But it wasn't until the sign that God had arranged to give him at the baptism where he knew this, behold, the Lamb of God kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And so, but this same guy who had that
Yeah.
revelation was this great prophet, no greater born of women, that Jesus said,
Mm-hmm.
that says, in prison now, are you the one, or shall we look for someone else? And it is interesting, too, that John the Baptist was not directly chastised for that. So, but there was a smidgen of chastisement, because Jesus said, here's what, do you tell him this, the blind see, and et cetera, et cetera. And he said, and blessed is he who does not stumble over me.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
this line, this line, it's important for our discussion, because sometimes we have not predisposition, we have expectations about what Jesus is supposed to be for us in our life, especially experientially,
Yeah.
that John the Baptist had. And it was understandable, yet they were mistaken. They weren't quite right.
Yeah.
And so Jesus said, here's my bona fides, okay? And I'm not going to bend to your expectations. I have my own agenda.
Yeah.
And blessed is he who does not stumble over me. It kind of reminds me a little bit, TC, of the end of the Bread of Life discourse there in John 6, where Jesus says these things, eat my flesh, drink my blood, which grosses people out. And so they left. And so Jesus turns to his disciples and not what's the right word? Appealing to them, just questioning, are you going to go too?
Mm-hmm.
And Peter says, where are we going to go?
Right.
You have the words of eternal life.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, we don't understand that any better than anybody else, but we know that you're the one.
Yeah.
And so we're going to just live with whatever that was you just said and meant. So, but isn't this so characteristic of our lives?
Yes.
If we have a good foundation that gives us confidence, then that helps us in the time where everything seems to go against us. And that's the John the Baptist or Bread of Life discourse. Those are all gospel examples. And these are not, just for the record, these are not stories
Right.
that are meant to teach the truth. These things actually happened.
Right.
and they happen to instruct us in something about Jesus and
Hmm.
walking with him. So this is where I think the work that I've been able to participate in apologetics and benefit from myself
Hmm.
has helped not just others but me too.
Yeah.
Because you wake up in the middle of the night and then you wonder, am I, wishing on a star here? Am
Right.
I are my my efforts and my commitments misdirected?
Hmm.
And like I said, this is not unusual. Even C.S. Lewis said, there are times when all of this seems so unbelievable. As a Christian, he said this.
Yeah.
But then he said, there were times when I was an atheist and I thought it just all seemed so strange and unbelievable.
It's
So,
true.
so I have those moments too. You get involved or immersed in a worldly circumstance. And I don't mean a sinful thing, but you're just around a lot of people that don't believe like you believe
Hmm.
and seem to be perfectly sane and think you're nuts.
Yeah.
And you wonder, gee, is this all real? But
Yeah.
you see, this is where I just kind of review in my own mind the solid, substantial reasons why God
Hmm.
exists and Jesus is Him.
Right.
Emmanuel, God with us,
Yeah.
come down to be with us. And then, of course, his life, and which is amazing. Nobody could invent this. I have a friend who just went to be with the Lord earlier this year, but Tom Gilson, who wrote a book. Let's see how the title is Too Good to Be False.
Yeah.
It's about
Wow.
Jesus. And one of his points is nobody could invent this story about Jesus. No one
Hmm.
would invent it. A lot of
Hmm.
people invented stories with Jesus kind of as an archetype of
Right.
their hero, but
Yeah.
nobody would invent this story because here's a man who had all this power and he never used it for himself to benefit
Mm.
himself.
Yeah.
He used it to fulfill a mission, which was about the rest of us dying for sin, etc. But anyway, so this is it's these are things that are defensible, and that's one thing. You read the story, you think, who? One of the evidences for its truthfulness is that it's hard to imagine someone could have imagined the things that Jesus said, or come up with these things all on our own, or be the
Right.
kind of individual he was. But there's so much more, as you know, and Stand to
Hmm.
Reason um, focuses in on the so much more
Right.
that in our conferences and our teaching and our writing and our website and where we go visiting other churches, as all of our team does, our speaking team, which is we have 6 people now on our team after 32 years. It's pretty cool. I'm thrilled
Yeah.
about that. So we're just helping Christians be more confident about their views and then giving
Hmm.
them tools to address the challengers that obviously are everywhere on so many more aspects of a robust Christian worldview than ever
Hmm.
before. Because now a
Right.
whole bunch of more things that seem to be like no duh, like male and female,
I
for
know.
example, who'd have thunk kind of
Right.
thing. But now we're facing things we never expected to face, the
Right.
distortions of reality. Anyway, those are the things, the two things that I'm just coupling there together, just kind of to review, um, are the understanding that God works overtime in our lives through the hardship and difficulties. Remember, Peter
Hmm.
says in 1 Peter 4, he says, "Why are you surprised at this fiery ordeal amongst you, as if something strange were happening to you?"
Yeah.
What a
Yeah.
line. What a
Yeah.
line. So that's kind of, let's have a proper expectation
Yeah.
of what. And also understand, if you haven't seen it already in your own life, that when the hardship and difficulty comes in your life, it's a gift from God. It is a
Hmm.
gift from God. Every classic writer on the reality of the Christian life says the same thing.
Hmm.
Suffering is a gift. Hardship is a gift. Because
Yeah.
what God intends to accomplish in our lives through it.
Hmm.
And sometimes we get kind of the historical perspective and we can see, oh, now I see what God was doing there. And
Yeah.
that helps us in the future to be confident in Him. And then that second large thing is just we have good reasons to be confident
Hmm.
that the Christian view of reality, the Christian story of reality, is the true story. It
Yeah.
reflects the way the world actually is, and therefore our confidence in Christ is not ill spent.
Right. So much of what you just said, my heart is just yes, yes, yes. Apologetics for me, and I've said this many times, in multiple episodes. It is a gift of love from God, and
Hmm.
it is when my heart is crushed the most, and it has been many times, and
Yeah.
I'm sure will be again, that my head can come to the rescue. And it's basically the studies that I've done. I'm not a content expert. I have not been a big research apologist. I am
Hmm.
just have studied basically what has intrigued me or been initiated by my own doubt or by my own questions.
Sure.
But it bolsters those times when I am like, even it does sound funny when we're with non-believers and we say, well, at least we have, eternity. We're going to get a new body.
Hmm.
When we start saying some of these things, sometimes I'll listen to myself and think that really sounds crazy. That
Hmm.
sounds really, but when you have evidence about the resurrection and
Hmm.
the reliability of the New Testament documents and much more,
Hmm.
I walk myself back, so to speak, into a place of confidence.
Hmm.
And I don't grapple with feeling like a fool as I have in the past, but there are times when you just wonder, God, what's up with this? And
Sure.
your wisdom is so important here, just understanding our expectations,
Hmm.
having the evidence, and then not only knowing why we believe, but what we believe,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
what I love, and I'm sure you're going to get into. I
Hmm.
talk a lot on this podcast about the biblical worldview
Hmm.
and the way I look at it. And I'm sure, the way it has made sense to me is it's like life is throwing us all these puzzle pieces, all of us. We're
Hmm.
getting all these questions. Why, what's going on? And what we need in order to make sense of it all is a box top. We need
Hmm.
that box top. I've heard the box top
Hmm.
analogy, but for me, I'm thinking, which box top makes sense of the actual
Right.
questions? How do we make sense of everything that we're really walking through? What's the framework
Hmm.
by which we can look at life's episodes and the things we go through and then find a corresponding real answer,
Sure.
even if it isn't a fun answer, even if
Right.
it isn't the one that
Mhm.
feels best? I don't want to live I don't want a box top that's just making me feel good if it's not going to really put the pieces anywhere.
Right.
So,
Right. That's such a superb segue into talking about the story of reality. I hate to
yes.
give it a pause. I have two other comments before we go there, if that's all
Yeah,
right.
go right
Based
ahead.
on something that you just said, and you were talking about, we have eternity, and um, at least we have eternity. And I want two things about that. One of them is that there is eternity for us helps to put our difficulties of our life in perspective. And I got this
Mhm.
way of looking at it from J. Warner Wallace, the apologist, who's a very close friend.
Yeah.
And Jim talks about, like, if you're 10 years old and and you've had health problems until you're 10, it's like your whole life and it's really miserable. But if it gets fixed at 10 and then you're 60, you hardly even remember that because you
Yeah.
have all these good healthy years, whatever. So you always have to compare the suffering to the lifetime taken as a whole. Now,
Mhm.
when you look at Christianity, we have eternity. That's the arc. And so what's going to take place is all of the suffering in this life is going to be proportionally diminished as we move further and further into eternity.
Yeah.
And so it becomes almost at some point like virtually inconsequential because it's such a minutia compared. If you live, say, 100,000 years, those 2 years of hardship turned into like, oh, what was that?
Nothing.
That was just
Yeah.
a snap. So that's one way of looking at it, and something that's helped me a lot from, I guess, what people might call midlife crisis, which I'm 75 and I've never had anything like that. But I think one of the reasons is I realize, because I'm a Christian, that I don't have to fit all of life's satisfaction into this 4 score and 10.
Yeah.
And if I haven't finished my bucket list, I didn't get this, that, and the other. Life is just filled with all kinds of disappointments and things you
Yeah.
wish you would have done differently or whatever. And if you have no kind of eternal trajectory, it's very easy to feel very defeated when you're 2/3 of the way through your natural life expectation and you think, oh man, this has not gone the way I had in mind. And
Mhm.
I don't know if I can get it back. if I can fit all that stuff in or fix all these things before I finally expire, that being the end. But if it's not the end and God has something for you in the future that is so much better, it allows you then to think of this as only one part of a very long journey.
So
And
good.
most of that journey is going to be much better than this part.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one part. Always just thinking I've got more. It's not, doesn't have to be. So even if the whole lifetime here is really difficult, which it is for some people, then that difficulty ends with the new creation and the resurrection and all that other stuff. So that's helpful. But there's another element here, and it was the at least that you said there, and I understood what you meant, but I want to speak to that a little bit because it's more than at least. Like at least I'll have eternity. J.P. Moreland, one of my mentors, a philosopher, said that this life, God is, how did he put it? This life is, God is making us fit to spend eternity with him. In this life, God is making us fit to spend eternity with him. And so there's a verse that is somewhat unusual, actually two that go together that speak to this. And one of them is in 1 Timothy, where Paul tells Timothy, he said, look, at physical exercise, pumping iron, all that has some benefit. But godliness is a means of great gain, for it holds a promise, watch this, not just for this life, but also the life to come. So there is benefit I mentioned earlier about you begin to enjoy in a certain sense, the pleasures of virtue. You enjoy goodness for its own sake, as God is, sanctifying you. Afterwards yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. We talk about Hebrews 12. But it's not only that, it's also doing something for eternity. So there is a sense, and this is what's mystical about it, like how does that work? There's a sense in which the growth that we experience in this life has an impact on the quality of life in eternity. Now, that's what's weird, because it seems like, wow, I thought we were all going to be like perfectly happy. Well, I think that's true, but there's something else in here that has to be factored in that is hard to explain.
Yeah.
Remember in Hebrews 11, where you see that the author of Hebrews is going through all of these great individuals of faith, and some were delivered by faith and some were not. They died in faith and through faith, whatever, and others, that famous little phrase there halfway through the chapter, and others. And then it makes a reference to them receiving a better resurrection. How could there be a better resurrection? But there is a better resurrection. The only metaphor that I've heard, or an parallel that somebody said, is like you can have a perfect 100-watt light bulb or a perfect 1,000-watt light bulb. They're both perfect, but they glow at different intensities, obviously.
Yeah. Wow, that's good.
So, I mean, whatever, if that helps, but it is kind of a mystery.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, the takeaway is whatever happens in this life for good, development of virtue and sanctification, godliness, the way Paul puts it there in 1 Timothy, bears fruit.
It's upping our wattage.
Pardon me? It's upping
It's
your
upping our
wattage.
wattage.
So this is where the at least comes in. It isn't just at least. We're going to hold out until we get to heaven.
That's so
but
good.
The things that are happening here, just like the Spurgeon citation, the things that are happening here are accruing benefit.
Yeah.
I think of it as, it's kind of a corny way of putting it, but I think of it as, this is my spiritual 401k, right?
Yeah.
You get to cash it out, but you're adding to that in this life to get benefit on your retirement, so to speak.
Yeah.
Eternal retirement. So maybe that makes sense to people, but I think that is a real part of the whole process. So you want to segue into the story of reality?
Yes, I would. I'm not sure that every listener would even know what the biblical worldview is. And I think in your book, Story of Reality, you just set out that biblical meta-narrative so beautifully. And I really love, and I have actually used multiple times, the five words. I think it's 5 words. It's God, man, Jesus, cross, and resurrection.
Oh, you get 5 stars.
Thank you. I need those. But that has been so helpful to me because it does help me recall very quickly, maybe not every detail, but the big bullet points of the big
Right.
story and
Yeah,
the gospel.
I call that the plot line of the
Yeah,
story
the plot
because
line.
this is a narrative. It's a story. It has a
Hmm.
beginning, has an end. It has an introduction of the main characters. Think of any story.
Yeah.
Introduction of the main characters, then conflict resolution, then like a denouement, they call it. The writers call it.
Hmm.
It's like it all comes together in restoration or whatever.
Yeah, the following
Resolution then
action.
restoration. So those are the main parts of a worldview too: creation, fall, redemption, restoration. So you have the same thing in all stories. If you don't have those things, it's not a story. Nobody's going to read it.
Mm.
And usually you get this introductory material, and you're watching a movie, you're reading a book, and then it's like the Hobbits, and then all of a sudden there's a problem. Now this ring, and okay, what are you going to do about the ring? Have the big party, then get whatever, and now you got to get rid of this ring. And then the whole thing is about solving the problem, and then you have the resolution and restoration finally of Middle Earth, whatever, because the bad guy's gone. Okay,
Hmm.
notice that's a standard. This is the way the arc of the story of the Bible goes also. And so these 5 words that you described, if people are a little more theologically astute, they recognize these are actually 5 areas of classical theology.
Hmm.
God proper, anthropology, man; Christology, Jesus; soteriology, the salvation and the cross; and eschatology, the final disposition of everything. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do with this book, is to try to provide this foundational understanding of main theological concepts, but somewhat in a story form.
Hmm.
Now, as you read it, it isn't a story. I'm not, but I'm trying to use a narrative style
Hmm.
to tell the story. So there's theology in there, but it's not heavy duty. There's no theological terms in there, but all the theological concepts are developed. And what it does is, and Nancy Piercy wrote the introduction. She's great. I'm so thankful for that. And what she says there is, she was a student of Francis Schaeffer, as I was too. So we share a heritage there at L'Abri. She was a student at L'Abri, and I just visited, but nevertheless, he had a great influence in our lives. And she says in the introduction that that Francis Schaeffer has made the point that the story of Christianity doesn't start with Jesus. It starts with, in the beginning, God. It starts at the beginning of the story.
Hmm.
And a lot of people have bits and pieces of the story, and you mentioned the box top. When I talk about this with an audience, I have a puzzle box, and I just empty it on the floor right in front of them, which really annoys some people because they want to come and pick it up. Maybe that's just teasing you
Yeah.
to have the same fit. But nevertheless, if this is the way the Christian story looks, their
Hmm.
picture of reality. It looks like it's a bunch of pieces, and maybe you got the right pieces, maybe not. Maybe you got pieces from other stories mixed in. You don't know that, even with a regular puzzle, until you put it all together. Then you see the
Hmm.
big picture, and then you know, are you missing pieces?
Hmm.
Or do you have other pieces that got mixed in that don't fit in this story? I've talked to people who believe in reincarnation, for example. And I say, well, reincarnation doesn't fit in our story.
Hmm.
It doesn't do any work for us. It's like trying to put a carburetor on a computer. It's like, so that larger picture is what the story of reality is about, the book. And I take these 5 points, which really are the arc of the story. It's the God, man, Jesus, cross, resurrection turn out to be the outline of the story. So in the beginning, God made everything else from nothing else, and it's all his because he made it. And it includes material things and immaterial things. So things you can see and things you can't see. This is all part of God's world. By the way, if that's the way God actually made the world, then things like, turning water into wine, or virgin birth, or resurrection, these aren't odd. They fit right into our story,
Hmm.
because from the outset, remember, the introduction tells us what kind of world we're in. Whether you're reading the introduction of the story of reality, the biblical account, I use the word story, but I'm not talking about a myth, because
Right.
it doesn't start once upon a
Right.
time.
Right.
You know, there's an arc there, a narrative arc to it. And I lost my thought now, so I'll just keep going. So you at God making the broadband is narrower than it used to be. So sometimes I
I
kind of get
understand. I do.
wonder a bit. But there's God. Now what he does, so this world that is 2 different types of things, material, immaterial. It's not the cosmos is all there is and all there ever was or ever will be. That's Carl Sagan's materialistic, naturalistic world of the atheist. No, this is bigger than that. And so it entails that things like that are going to happen. At least they're possible. It fits right in. It's not a conflict. And then he creates human beings like him in some valuable way, important way, made in his image. And so you got God and you got man. And this allows human beings to have what God intended, which is a friendship with God. None of the other creatures were adequate. Only someone like God was the kind of created being that could share a friendship with God. And so God created male and female to be fruitful and multiply and subdue, and which doesn't mean, destroy the world. It means garden it, to put it simply, be a steward of it. And so meaningful work is involved there. Okay. And then man, speaking generically here, mankind, through Adam and Eve, our first parents, got himself in a heap of trouble, didn't he? He decided, I want to do it my own way. I do not want to obey. I want to follow my own rules. I call it the primal heresy. It's essentially relativism, not God's objective reality or objective right and wrong, but what I think is best for me, satisfies my eyes, it's good for knowledge, blah, blah, blah. You know the account in chapter 3. And man, that's a big problem, okay? And this is why there's evil in the world. There's evil in the world because when man disobeyed God, he broke his relationship with God. He broke his relationship with Eve, and that is interrelationships of other human beings. And he broke his relationship in some strange way with the environment. The whole world groans. I don't know if that all entails entirely, but that's implicit in this statement. In other words, they broke the world. This is why the world's broken. And by the way, everybody knows this. It doesn't matter where you lived or when you lived. Everybody knows that the world's broken. That's the problem of evil that people bring up all the time. Now, just as a pause here, and in the book, I do take these little side trips to do what I call soft apologetics, the way C.S. Lewis does in Mere Christianity. There's a kinship between the two books. I'm not Lewis, and Story Reality is not Mere Christianity, which is legendary, obviously, iconic as a Christian book. Always like number one in the apologetics category on Amazon. But here he's trying to give a picture of the Christian worldview and anticipating some objections. And so I'm following that lead with my own version of that may be easier for people to read than Mere Christianity. Now, I don't think Mere Christianity is hard to read, but a lot of people nowadays do, which really surprises me. So anyway, so this would be maybe, Mere Christianity light or something like that, but it makes it easier. And I follow a little different arc than he does. He does a theological assessment. I do more a narrative. And in any event, in our narrative here, now we've got a broken world. And so our worldview can explain why the world's broken. If you're an atheist, the world is not broken.
Right.
Now, that's odd because everybody thinks it is.
Right.
And to be an atheist, you have to deny one of the most salient details of the world as we experience it, that it's morally broken. And it's not just like my opinion, things happen that I don't like. Like I don't like Brussels sprouts, for example. I just think they're disgusting. And they're on the menu of every restaurant in the country now, which blows my mind. But don't pass those under my nose when you're moving around the table. Nevertheless, that's my personal preference or like or dislike. That's not where morality works. When we say like genocide is wrong, evil, wicked, we're talking about the genocide. We're not talking about our feelings.
Right.
And this is what everybody's seeing. There's some things that are actually wrong in the world. But an atheist has no way of making sense of that because in as Richard Dawkins says, this is a world of no right, no wrong, just blind, pitiless indifference is his words. That's what you get with atheism. So this is a point for Christian theism as a worldview and against atheism as a worldview.
Yeah.
It can't explain one of the most, as I said, salient details of the world as it actually is. And by the way, when you have an ability to explain something as it actually is, your explanation fits the world, that is the classical definition of truth. If you say it is, and it is, That's what's true. That's Aristotle's
Yeah.
way of putting it. But in any event, so here we have one of the most difficult challenges people think, and it is a challenge, but they don't see it the right way, to Christian theism, and that's the problem of evil. And it turns out to be more of a challenge for an atheist than it is for a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
because at least we can make sense of it. It's part of our story. In
Right.
fact, we wouldn't have a story if there was no problem of evil.
Right.
And our story's not over yet.
Yeah.
So we're still moving through it. So now man's in a heap of trouble, and there's a problem now because God is a just God. He's not just loving; He's also just. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason He's loving is because He's good, and the reason He's just is because He's good. So that's why people say, "Well, a loving God wouldn't wait. He's only loving because He's good." Yeah, well, that's why He's just. That's why He's mad at evil. He's
Mm-hmm.
got to punish it. Anyway, so this is not good news. And so what God does is He initiates a rescue plan, and to rescue human beings, because in this story, man cannot rescue himself. It's
Mm-hmm.
impossible. He's lost. He's down in a hole without a rope. All kinds of illustrations, and God has got to rescue him. And so the rescue plan is for God to become a human being. I should say, add humanity to His deity. He doesn't change into a human.
Mm-hmm.
He remains God when He adds humanity to His deity. And this is Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. God comes down, which is an unbelievable act of humility, by the way.
Yeah.
This is what a lot of people don't. For him, Paul talks about this in Philippians chapter 2, that even though he existed in the form of God, he did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped and held on, but humbled himself and came
Mm-hmm.
down, and now to serve and to die. And that means we should be like him. That's the application that Paul makes in Philippians 2. But it's the humility and the humiliation, all things considered, of God that was done on our behalf to rescue us. And that
Mm-hmm.
happened on the cross. So now you got God, man, Jesus, the God-man, and cross. And what I explained there is very simply what the reformers called the great exchange.
Mm-hmm.
That on the cross, the greatest suffering was not the nails in his hands and feet. It wasn't the scourging that ripped his back to shreds. It wasn't the crown of thorns, the beating that he got just before he was actually crucified. All of that is unbelievably brutal, but there were a lot of people who experienced that. The harshest experience of Jesus was the punishment that descended upon him by the Father, who poured out his wrath
Mm-hmm.
on Jesus as a substitute for us. By the way, this particular point is very controversial in certain circles in the church. People
Mm-hmm.
hate to hear this.
Yeah.
And but I'll just say, you cannot. I wrote a piece that's on our website called "Why the Blood" to answer this challenge, because there's a line in the book that some people got deeply offended to in this section that I'm talking about, and that I talked about Jesus being the Savior. What to save is to rescue from imminent danger. What is the danger that Jesus rescued us from?
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, Jesus came to rescue us from the Father.
Mm.
Oh, people hate that. Some people do. But this is what the text teaches.
Mm-hmm.
The Father is angry. The King is angry, and with good reason.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus says in Matthew 10, don't fear man who can kill the body but not the soul. Fear rather him who can throw body and soul into hell.
Yeah.
So when God judges at the end, he's not judging sin in the abstract. He's judging people who do sin.
Yeah.
And so and one of the things I trade on here is Isaiah 53, which Peter quotes as applying to Jesus. By his stripes we are healed. And when you read through Isaiah 53, you cannot miss line after line after line after line of this servant suffering for the sins of others.
Mm-hmm.
It over and over it says the same thing. So
Yeah.
this is the point that I make, and this is how we're able to be forgiven of all our transgressions, because God is just and the justifier of him who has faith in Jesus. Just because the crimes are paid for, but they're paid for by a substitute so that he can extend mercy instead of justice to us. And that's the gospel. That's the good news.
Yeah.
I mean, it's as simple as that. And by the way, this is why Jesus is the only way. He's the only way because he's the only one who solved the problem.
Yeah.
Nobody else could do
So
this but
good.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So this you see how when you see the full arc of the story, that the problem of evil and Jesus being the only way, which are offensive to skeptics, non-Christians, whatever, and also troublesome to Christians because they don't see how it all fits together. All of a sudden, these fit together. They're two sides of the same coin. And the way I put it is sometimes singular problems, problem of evil, have singular solutions.
Yeah.
Singular problems have singular solutions. And we know this is true, by the way, in medicine. Sometimes you could have a disease that there's only one antidote.
Yeah.
And you may not like that, and it may not be pleasant or fun. It still is the case that
Yeah.
this is the one antidote for whatever ails you. And if you don't take the antidote, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a parallel or a metaphor, not a metaphor, but maybe an illustration to help
Yeah.
people understand how there can be only one way of salvation. And in this case, it's not just the bald-faced claim that Jesus is the only way. We see the details of what he did to rescue us that nobody else did and nobody else could do. It had to be the God-man. And there are other reasons for this. I explain that in the book, go into more detail, but it had to be the God-man who could suffer in a finite amount of time in a way that paid for the sins of multitudes, and their punishment would have been eternal. How do you do that? And by
Right.
the way, how is it? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believed in him would not perish but have everlasting life. The most famous verse in the Bible. Wait a minute. How is it an example of God's love if he beats up some other guy for my benefit? I mean, maybe that's the other guy's love for me. Yeah, he gave his life. But how is that God's love? It's only example of God's love if the other guy is God.
Right. Yep.
Emmanuel, God with us.
Yeah.
And so God takes the punishment on himself in the second person of the Trinity in bodily form, in the person of Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah.
So that at the very end of it all, as he hangs on the cross, before he dismisses his spirit to the Father, he says, "It is finished." He's not saying, "Oh, God, that's over with."
Right.
No, he said, "I have accomplished what I came to accomplish. It's done. It's paid for." And then Paul develops these ideas more in the book of Romans and Galatians and other places. And this is our inheritance, so to speak, as Christians. We see this and we understand how it all works. And then this brings us to the final step. And by the way, I do say in the book, make it clear that this is a gift. It can't be earned. By grace you're saved through faith, not of yourselves. Not of works, that no one should boast. That's Ephesians 2:8-9. That's the very first verse that I remember remembering from 52 years ago when I was a brand new Christian, because it was so important to me. And then that determines how you respond, whether you trust Jesus for that, and that's what the word faith means. Whether you trust Jesus will determine what happens to everybody at the final resurrection. God, man, Jesus, cross, resurrection. And at that, I cash it out quite simply. And I actually got this from someone else, so I give them a hat tip in my footnote, but it's a great way of putting it. Either perfect justice or perfect mercy. And perfect justice is punishment for everything you've ever done wrong, and God misses nothing. He's making a list and he's checking it twice, okay? Or forgiveness, perfect mercy, which is forgiveness for everything you've ever done wrong, and God misses nothing. And that's what separates, we can use this metaphorically, but it's actually what Jesus said, separates the sheep from the goats in the final judgment.
Yeah.
And those who here's the simple calculus, TC, and that is either Jesus pays or we pay.
Right.
Either Jesus pays or we pay. And if we pay, that means eternal separation from God. And apart from all the fire and gnashing of teeth and darkness and wailing and all of that stuff, just think, if you were made to be in friendship with God and all access to God is completely cut off, if you were made for that, all access is not cut off from non-believers, not right now.
Right.
If all access, and we are away from the presence of the Lord forever, is the way Paul puts it in 2 Thessalonians, then we will be ruined.
Yeah.
Completely ruined, which is what the word destroy means. It doesn't mean snuffed out of existence. It means ruined.
Yeah.
And that will be hell.
Yeah.
Being away from any mercy or grace of God of any kind,
Mhm.
and that's forever. And
Yeah.
it's not just what I put in the book. It's not just that the clock doesn't stop ticking; the clock doesn't even start ticking.
Mm.
And so, but by contrast, those who bend the knee, receive the gift, entrust themselves to the Father through the rescuer, Jesus, will experience the best life that they could ever imagine, the life that they were made for. Not
Mhm.
in this life. All kinds of cool things happen in this life, but along with the other things we're talking about, it's painful.
Mhm.
But in the resurrection, the best we could ever imagine forever.
Yeah.
And I like the way C.S. Lewis puts it. I trade on him a lot because he's so good at characterizing these. And in this wonderful essay that he wrote called The Weight of Glory, which is another verse, 2 Corinthians 2:16 through 18, where this phrase is mentioned, which is it's a promise. Momentary light affliction is producing for us the eternal weight of glory. Well, in
Mhm.
that book, he has a line in there towards the end, and he says, "The door we've been knocking on all of our lives will finally open."
Mm.
Isn't that great?
I love that. I
I wish
love
I would have
that.
written that. That's a great line. It
Yeah.
just almost chokes me up every time when I
I
deliver it to a
same.
group. I can't, it's so, because we have been knocking. All of
Yeah.
us have been knocking
Yes.
on that door, that yearning, that longing that
Yep.
Lewis is so clever at characterizing in his writing. We all
Yeah.
know that sense of longing for something beyond. And he said that longing has a satisfaction. Now, whether we experience that satisfaction or not is determined by how we deal with the problem, which is
Mhm.
our rebellion against God.
Yeah.
And the solution is the rescuer. So
Yeah.
there's the arc, the story of how the world began, how it ends, and everything important that happens in between.
Well, I thank you for going through that. It's such a, I mean, it is a story, and again, not a myth. It is history,
That's right.
but to see it at that with that plot line,
Hmm.
and then it's. I just want to hear it every day. I think we
Yeah.
we need to say it to ourselves every day. And you said something before we started recording that I wanted to make sure to have you say again.
Hmm.
It's not that we're looking to find out how God fits into our story.
Oh, yeah.
But how did you say that? You know what I'm talking about.
Well, this actually was a inversion of a line on a tract that's very popular in witnessing, and this is not a criticism of the tract at all, but I do think it sometimes gives the wrong impression. And the line in the tract has to do with God's wonderful plan for your life,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the opening appeal. God has a wonderful plan for your life, but we're not experiencing because we're sinful and
Mhm.
separated from God, so we don't experience His wonderful
Mhm.
plan, love and wonderful plan. I think that's I think that's in the wrong order. I think that's kind of sometimes will give the impression that amounts to the tail wagging the dog, because it's not about God's wonderful plan for our lives as much as it is about our lives for God's wonderful plan.
I love that.
So
Yeah.
if we have the understanding that it's our lives for His plan, that means the details of our lives are subject to His greater purposes,
Mhm.
which include sanctification in our own life,
Right.
but greater purposes that our lives are expendable for. That's why we have martyrs.
Mm.
And we think of people like Charlie Kirk. How could God take Charlie Kirk out?
Mhm.
How could He let that happen? And Nabil Qureshi, I'm putting back
Right.
over my shoulder because I have
Yeah.
his books, and I knew Nabil since he was first a Christian in 2005.
Right.
And what an incredible witness for God as a former Muslim, and other
Mhm.
people like that. Why? Well, we don't know why, and that is God isn't telling us, but God has bigger purposes,
Mhm.
and I think Charlie understood this, for
Mhm.
example,
Mhm.
and so. And what we've seen here in the last month and a half since the murder, is we've seen some amazing things happen in people's interest in the kingdom. Ironically, a Christian gets murdered, and that is something that stimulates people to think more strongly and positively about
Mhm.
the Christian worldview and are
Yeah.
asking more questions. So,
Yeah.
um, so was that worth it? I don't know. Like, God only knows if it's worth it. We don't know. We can't assess that. But
Mhm.
I'm just making the point that we are expendable. And I've been doing what I'm doing for a long time, but I can be gone tomorrow. I have friends that
Mhm.
went just like that.
Mhm.
I didn't know Charlie, but he's an example.
Right.
So we never know. But it's about God's plan.
Right.
And when we understand that larger arc, we find our place in that plan. Um, and our unique place, I think there are unique, we each have unique gifts,
Hmm.
and find our place in that plan. This is in the introduction of the book, that we ask questions: why this, why that, why am I here, etc. Well, this is the story that answers those questions and helps you to find your place in the plan.
Hmm.
And so that's. But by the way, I mentioned off the air, but I want to mention to your listeners right now. When I was on that interview, that longer one with Alex O'Connor and Dr. K was the other fella, and then Stephen Bartlett. Um, we were discussing meaning and purpose in life. And so the story of reality does speak to that. So
Hmm.
we were offering that audience a landing page they could go to and get a complimentary chapter of the story of reality. So I want to just give that URL if it's okay with you.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I don't have a specially made landing page for TZ
It's,
and her friends, but you can go to the DOAC
we'll share.
landing page. Yes. Okay. Yes. So no problems at all. So that landing page is str.org. That's the Stand to Reason website, str.org/DOAC,
Okay.
Diary of a CEO, DOAC, DOAC, str.org/DOAC. And that'll be a little welcome there. And of course, we think that it presumes that you listen to the DOAC. It doesn't matter. You can just fill out the thing, and there's a couple questions to answer, and then we'll send you a PDF copy of this chapter, How God Rescues a Broken World, or however it's the rescue chapter from the book, but we gave it a little different title for the purposes of this. So if anybody listening wants to at least get a taste,
Mm.
so to speak, of a chapter of the story of reality, they may want to then go further with it, and that would be fine with me.
Thank you. I will put that in the show notes as well as
Okay.
and also how to find you and your ministry. And I just want to say thank you so much, Greg. That was
Mm.
just so encouraging, so life giving, every
Mm.
bit of it. And I want to say thank you to the listeners for joining us and ask you to consider sharing this episode with someone that you know might benefit from this type of big picture encouragement that I just think is indispensable. And also consider subscribing so that you don't miss a single moment of true comfort. Thank you all so much. And thank you again, Greg, so
You're welcome.
much.
It's a pleasure to be with you, TZ. Thanks.